Welcome, everybody. I've got an exciting edition of Overtime today. Since Paul flew all the way in from California, I wanted to get him and Marty on the mics together, talk a little bit more about growing Advoco, successful businesses, and exit strategies and partner conversations around those. So, first of all, guys, welcome. Looking sharp in the same shirts.
Well,
anybody want to explain why you're dressed the same?
Because we like being twins.
Yeah. And we're heading straight off for a golf competition and member guest.
To dominate, right?
Yeah. Today's just a practice round.
Which
so,
probably means, I told Paul earlier, I was like, that probably means you'll shoot your best round of the week.
That's right.
Practice round.
Right. No pressure, but.
Well, good. Well, I know we've got some limited time, but I did want to grab both of you, get you on the mics. Let's just first talk, because again, I think it's one of the keys to the Advoco relationship was the three partners and the relationship you guys had, how it worked, how you balanced each other out. So I'm just going to throw it out there. You know, how did it work? Why did it work? What would you take from that to recommend to other companies?
I think, as I may have said on the previous talk, I think three people, power of three, kind of three of you running a company is just a great number.
Yeah, it's funny, I never thought about it. And when I first met Paul, I remember sitting at his house drinking wine, and he started telling me about that. Because at the time, we sort of had 3 plus Paul's, we had 4. And it just was always difficult because 4 is always 2 and 2, or who's siding. And Paul always said his philosophy was this 3, and I never thought about it. And once you have 3, you're either all in together or it's 2 to 1. And it's the way it should be. And again, it's we have a philosophy, I think at By Design, was the power of 3. Like we talk about, we have 3 values, 3 keys to success. And so
and decision making just flows. With 3 people, you don't have conflict typically. Becomes maybe 2 people convincing the third person, but it happens without animosity.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the interesting story in that was when we got our first offer to buy Advoco, Paul had set it up, we got it negotiated, we got a letter of, as they said, non-binding intent, like nothing to it. But we really got down to it, and in Paul's situation, he was ready to exit. Like he was ready to do other things, and he thought it was the right deal. At the time, it wasn't in my heart, and even Steve, we weren't quite ready. And so, yeah, we hashed it out, but it was whatever the vote was. So if Steve said he was ready and Paul was ready, then we would have sold. If Steve and I were not ready, which we weren't, we said it and we worked it out. And we stood by the decision, but it was, I think, one of the most sort of best process because there was 3. If it was 2 and 2, it would have been a mess.
Yeah. There would have been standoff. There would have been difficulty, and I think the other thing is we're 3 friends, always have been, always will be, and so that's really important because we care about each other.
Yeah, and speak to that a little bit, Paul. I know there's a story in Marty's book about you encouraging them to kind of go be better, right? Like, get out of here and go get better. Again, I'll throw it out to both of you on where that came from, why it came up, and then maybe what happened.
Yeah, I'll let Marty kind of major on that. But I think, it's important that we all have lives, we all have kind of different approaches, and we want to do different things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was interesting. I think we were. If you remember, I think we might have been 4 or 5 million, and every couple of years, Paul would write the little manifesto. Like when we were 2, you wrote the $5 million plan.
Yeah.
When we were 5, Paul wrote the $10 million plan, and we were sitting maybe 4, getting close to 5, but we were kind of stuck. And I remember sitting. We always had our Friday noon partner meeting, which is probably one of our best meetings, where we would just talk about whatever was going on. And Paul was like encouraging, like, you guys need to get out, go to some seminar, go to a class. You need some new ideas. And you were kind of like, I don't care what it is. And that was when I discovered EntreLeadership, the master class. And you were super encouraging. Steve and I went off to that class. I remember that's when I came back. I said I became a born-again businessman. And that's when, like, within 3 years, we went from 5 to 15 to 20. And
I mean, certainly a pivotal moment. And every company goes through those stages of, I'm not going to call it stagnation, but you lose the kind of momentum. Let's call it momentum. And you need something external, be that another company, to help you move and gain your momentum back.
I think that's a great insight that I don't think I would have thought of. Is that something you had experienced in one of your first jobs, and you knew kind of, hey, if we get outside and get some external help, it'll maybe kickstart us a little bit?
I think every company that I've been involved in hits that. You could almost call it a wall, almost similar to running a marathon, because you are running a marathon, and you've got to get over that in some fashion, and somebody external, I think, typically can help you in that at that point.
I just think that's a great point. Want to highlight it again, because I know as we talk to business owners, being stuck is one of their what's keeping them up at night, right? They're grinding, they're working hard, they're putting in 60-hour weeks, and they're just stuck. So I think that's great insight of, hey, go look outside your four walls for something that can help you.
And I think directly after the Entree Leadership that Marty and Steve went to, you could visibly see the results of it in terms of. I think we employed some more salespeople. I think we just broke through the barrier.
Yeah.
We broke through a barrier, and it was our own barrier.
Yeah. No, you guys both should thank me for that event, because there was a big turn of event. You remember?
I do.
Paul got out of HR.
I do.
That's when we hired
So you're basically
Dale.
saying hiring the HR person broke through the wall.
Definitely.
God, thanks, guys.
Definitely,
Thanks.
yes.
With that, my experience, I got to join some of those Friday calls just to update on whatever we were doing. And one thing I always kind of noticed from the very beginning was kind of, to your point, if it was just you and Steve, your force of personality versus his deliberate thinking. And Paul always he was kind of that person in the middle that would slide, whichever way he thought was right.
Yeah.
But talk
Sure.
a little bit about, Paul, maybe your role and how you did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically very, very simple. It's stopping the other two people from killing each other.
You used to laugh about that.
But in broad terms, you're playing a middle game. No decisions are right or wrong, are they? It's kind of you've got to make enough of the right decisions in a business to move forward and prosper. You're not going to make every decision correctly, but as long as you make the majority of them correctly, I think that then you move forward.
Yeah. One thing I think with that sort of power of three, and I think about Steve, Paul, and I, was, you're right, Steve, ran operations, high detail guy. I was the crazy guy, the high I, high D, running off. And then Paul, if you look, was kind of that 50, 60% neutral, and he was the sort of the arbiter in the middle. Like, it was his job to just keep us thinking differently, challenge us to think differently, but then, bring that consensus. And, even when it came to like ownership and so forth, how we divvied it up, Paul's role was finance, accounting, like really holding the business together while Steve and I ran. And it really was the right partnership. And I think sometimes when people are looking to grow a company, being intentional in those roles and having people with the right personalities, right? Because if everybody's all D's, we just get all excited, run out of the room, nothing gets done. If we're all C's, we get paralyzed. So we kind of need that balance. And I think it was one of the real keys to success.
I think the other thing to maybe talk about is equality. We always made a point of being paid in the same manner, equally for what people were kind of working and doing. All of our bonuses were of an equal nature, and we didn't have any conflict where any of us thought they should be getting paid differently more or whatever. And so, again, I guess everything, the theme of everything I say is lack of conflict.
Yeah.
And you can set your company up badly to have conflict in the same way as you can, you don't set things up properly to start with, then you end up with conflict, then you're kind of in a different situation.
I mean, in the early days when we had one of the original partners, I mean, it was set up for conflict because he was the CEO and everybody had different pay. He would decide different pay structures, different bonus structures, and it was a real mess. And you remember when he left, you remember what you called the first board meeting we had?
Yeah, I think it was the board meeting of tranquility.
It was good. He says, I'd like to open the first meeting of the peace and tranquility.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you guys, I didn't realize all that, but even how we set up our pay and bonus down the chain, everyone was always, again, experience and salaries may vary a little bit, but for the most part, everyone was on the exact same bonus structure, shooting for the same goals, and to your point, kind of set it up where there's not a whole lot of conflict available there.
And it's demonstrable to everybody in the company, kind of how it runs and how to be successful.
I mean, you said it. If you want to know what the company culture is, just go look at their pay structure and how bonuses are set up, how pay is created. If it's not equal and simple, then nobody understands it. Nobody knows where they're going to go. And that's one of the things we did with the leadership team was we didn't care kind of who you are. If you were on the leadership team, your bonus structures were all the same. We're either eating steak or we're eating hamburgers.
Yeah, but I know we talked to clients about this, and it's kind of controversial. I didn't really think it would be, but you get a lot of, well, almost why should I miss out on my bonus? My group hit all of our numbers. It's not my fault Marty didn't sell enough this year or whatever. And so it is kind of an interesting, the philosophy on that. I love it. I think it's the best way to do it. I think it gets everybody going in the same direction. But there are some counter thoughts to that out there.
Yeah, I'm sure. But sink or swim together would be the watchword.
To that point, I don't know the exact details, but I remember you telling me a story about you were sitting at Paul's house at one point.
Yeah, it was actually a funny story. Early on, I didn't really know Paul, and Paul was a good friend of Steve and the original owner, and I kind of thought Paul was their guy, and I'll never forget, I think it was one time Paul sent me a couple emails and I kind of blew it off. And I remember you kind of came back hard, like, dude, you don't do that. Like, we're respect. And it was a great message because I didn't really know the details. And so we said, I should go to Paul's house. And actually the other partner said, you need to spend time with Paul. So I literally flew to San Francisco, spent a weekend at his house. And I think that's where we really changed, bonded.
Yeah, and gelled.
Gelled. I got to understand, where Paul's thoughts, his experience and wealth of knowledge, just stuff I didn't have because through my years, I really didn't have a successful business. I didn't have somebody really laid it out. And I think that weekend was very monumental, other than I think when I spilled wine on red wine on Leslie's white couch didn't go over real well. But
there was always a lot of bonding in Cowley's cellar out there.
There was.
That was the problem. He got me in there.
Yeah, you walk in, it's daylight. You walk out, and it's no longer daylight.
Yeah.
It's for such a small room, you spend a lot of time in there.
Yeah.
It's a good way to relax everybody. Let's just put it that way.
I know when we say lack of conflict, setting up stuff it doesn't mean you don't have disagreements. It doesn't mean
of course.
I have this philosophy and you have that philosophy, right? And one of the examples I want you guys to talk about is the philosophy around vacation and a discussion you all had around vacation.
Yep, sure. I mean, I'm old school, and
at least he didn't say wiser.
Yeah.
He didn't throw that out yet.
Yeah, and at the time I was very much we give people good amounts of vacation, and we want them to take it, and Marty had a much more laissez-faire attitude to vacation. Let's put
Well,
it
I
that
would
way.
say I was the American, like, no, we work, we give bare minimum. Paul and Steve coming from Europe, they take most of the summer off. And they were just like, I was like, no, it's 2 weeks. And they're like, no, like, Marty, this is stupid. Like, give them 4 weeks. Let's pay, like, why not? Like, and I was like, yeah, why not? Like, it was kind of one of those where we just had different opinions, but you guys are right, and so.
But it all changed when Netflix decided to give everybody any amount of leave that they wanted. That what people didn't realize at the time was that
even worse.
if you were in the bottom 10% of that company, you got canned.
Yeah. Well, and they've done a bunch of studies on that since, and everybody breaks into two camps. You have your abusers who take months and months and months
Yeah.
off, and then your other group doesn't take any because they don't want to be seen as an
That's
abuser.
right,
So.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's a setup. I think because you don't know, like,
Yeah.
people need to know guidelines. And so to us, like, again, one of the things was we forced people, so we didn't do carryovers. Like, everybody says carryover. When I was at Fluor, I remember like trying to play golf, and I was thinking, well, if I carry over and I don't take vacation, my salary goes up, I get paid more. I like worked all the time, and it was stupid because you really need it. And so that was a great thing that I think Paul and Steve really brought was it's important to take time. So we don't do carryover. We were very generous with it, and I think it paid off.
And I think that goes back to your diversity of views, right? Like you said, Paul's worked on 6 different continents or whatever, and you've done a little bit of everything: run companies, manufacturing companies, services companies, and I think, again, I just wanted to be clear that when we say lack of conflict, it doesn't mean you don't have disagreements and have to work through some stuff. It just means the trust is there, and it's not set up inherently to be conflict.
Yeah, good point.
Paul, one of my favorite sayings, you always called it counting the beans for our all-employee meeting. Wasn't just money, it's counting the beans. Beans, brains, and bodies is what our part of the report out was. Just talk a little bit about, why that's important and why we did it every meeting.
I think so. I was the chief bean counter, and so that was my description job, and everybody knew me as that. But really and truly, it was anything back office was kind of under my remit. I think it's important that everybody in the management group of the company know how you're doing, and it's not always like a perfect story. If you just keep saying everything's great, then people don't believe you. And so it was an integral part of all of our actual full company meetings, wasn't it, to run through kind of the beans, the bodies, and everything else. So.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think you brought to the table, again, this was probably not in my upbringing, was that transparency. Like, can people handle it? Could they do it? But I think Paul was always like, they need to know what's going on, good or bad, because if you don't tell them, then if something does go, they're not prepared for it. And so to me, it was every month, Paul would share the beans, and we told everybody in the company where the revenues are, where the profits are, where the money, and they need to know. And that way they can be part of the solution or the challenges. And I think it was one of the best things that we did. And I know we talk to companies now, and it scares them. I mean, it really does. And they're afraid, somebody's going to go tell somebody, but it's like,
why would it matter?
Yeah.
Why
You
does it
think
matter?
about it,
And those discussions are happening anyways, so you might as well give them the right information to have the discussions.
I mean, it's a good point. If you don't give the information, then likely there's a whisper campaign.
Or they're making it up.
I don't think we're doing very well, or
Yeah.
we're doing great.
Yeah, and Paul, it's interesting you mentioned, because I worked for a company that every quarter, it was a bigger company, CEO sends out how everything's great. Year over year, revenue, got to pump up the Wall Street numbers. And then you get to the end of the year and they'd be like, but we're not giving bonuses, promotions. I was like, wait, I just got 4 quarters of emails saying how awesome everything is. But now you're saying, you're right. So it just plummets morale because you're telling me all year we're doing great, but now you're telling me
I can't give you a raise or a bonus because we didn't do well. Well,
Yeah.
which one's lying?
which one is lying? Yeah.
Exactly.
What is a punt? This is a term I've recently heard from you all. I have no idea.
Is this a Paul or Steve, or is this always you?
It was a Paul, and it came from a previous company, and a punt. The derivation of it, I think, is in something like Irish football or something, but it's taking a risk on something, and so we used to do a punt once a year on something totally different. So it's a allied but different business idea. So we'd throw something out. Maybe we'd want to start a training package company, whatever, or what were some of the other examples?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I was a punt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Originally, kind of bringing Marty in a slightly separate company was a punt. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's funny, in the early days, I was going to leave DataStream and start a company called Extreme for X DataStream. And Advoco was going to be a client, and I always said my Jerry Maguire story is I go to walk out the door and nobody came with me. And so talking to Paul and Steve, they're like, well, why don't you join us? We'll do a punt. And we actually started something called, I liked it. It was like Advoco Tech. I put money in, they put money in, and they said, let's start a secondary EAM business is how it originally got started.
Yeah.
And then it just started growing and merged, but that was a punt.
A morphing. Yeah, that's very true. And so, every company needs to change, and so why not once a year try something different? Not something that's going to necessarily change your company forever, but an additional service, an additional product, and we tried a bunch of things that didn't work. So, but you allocate some money to it. And you run it like a proper sub-business, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, even our training, right? Remember, we did a punt is let's try to create online training and build it. Turned out to be very integral to the success of our growth. And so it's funny is I think the punt is, you're right, it's probably like comes from English or Irish football, but probably in America is it's change of field. Like you got to change something. And when you punt, it just changes everything. And instead of people saying, well, let's try this or we might fail, it's just a punt.
Mm-hmm. And you can get the ball back after a punt, right?
Yeah.
Your defense can make a stand and get you the ball right back. I think the key, now that I know what it is, I think where companies fail on their punt is they do it as a +1. It's just more work, and they don't really fund it or resource it properly. And then they're like, well, it didn't work.
Didn't work, yeah. And so.
Yeah. It was always part of our, the next year budget, if you will. It's that next thing. And so we allocated money to it. I think that was the important part.
So your punt was by design and not by chance, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
I like that. I think I want to just kind of wrap it up because I know you guys have a tea time. Paul, we mentioned about owners being almost too involved and working in the business.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about how you guys, because I know it was a struggle a little bit for Marty and Steve maybe at some point of unrolling their sleeves.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about how you guys handled that at the founder level and the three of you taking a step back and letting the team kind of run.
Yeah. Well, I think because this was my, if you like, second company, I'd already learned that lesson. But it was really between Marty and Steve. There's this. There's a metric you can look at. For you to pull totally back, you've got to have, let's just say, six people out there operationally working. The metric for us was you need 6 people out there working for every one person who's unrolled their sleeves and gone back into management. And I think I would say it happened for Marty easier than it happened for Steve.
Mm-hmm. Although I did go kicking and screaming.
Yeah, but I would say, I would say Marty did a great job, actually, of recognizing and pulling people in to take over in his field.
Well, to your credit, Paul knew how to talk to me about that, and he would say, well, financially, if you ever want to sell the business, and talking to all my buddies, is the only people that sell is when the owners are less involved. And if you're going to be too involved, you will never sell this business.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you would kind of quote that all the time, and we see that in everything we do, is valuations when owners are too involved in the business and our ego takes over, actually makes us worth less than if we're not in it. And so,
but the byproduct is this: you don't hit this wall, or you get over the wall, and you kind of move on to another level.
yeah, Steve loved his one-on-ones. He he loved talking to his people, and Steve was that was in our manage, like our partner meeting all the time. It would, after Paul would really get on Steve, like, why are you doing that? Like, he would literally go, I don't understand, why are you doing that? Well,
At $1,000 an hour.
Yeah,
That's it. Yeah, or 2,000. Make it 2,000.
Make it 2,000. Yeah, that's true. Inflation, all that. So 2,000 an hour.
Yeah.
Well, good guys. I know you guys have to get out of there. I do want to take just a minute and say I want to thank you all. I never knew 8 years ago, whatever it was, when Paul and you guys called me up. To be honest, I didn't even know what position I was interviewing for. We never talked money. And I was 5 interviews. I think we were going to dinner. And I told one of my coworkers I was working somewhere, they're like, what's the job and how much? I was like, I don't care. I just want to work with these 3 guys, because I just knew I was going to learn so much. And I really did. Like, it was the greatest experience of my career. I would never be sitting here doing this if I didn't take that Advoco job and see you guys. So, I probably don't say it enough. I appreciate you guys. You guys changed my life, really, my career path, everything. And it's because of the people. It's not the job. It wasn't what we were doing. It was truly just you 3 and how you guys work together. And it's amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Dale. We appreciate you kind of immensely.
yeah.
Cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. It was a little bit longer overtime session, but when I get these 2, I have to just keep talking with them. So hit them straight today, boys, and
Okay.
we will talk soon.
We'll try it.
Yeah.